rival protesters collided this week in Southampton after an anti-immigration march came face-to-face with counter-demonstrations.
Well, we're joined now by an independent journalist, Emma Dunwell, who was at the Southampton Patriot protest. Good morning, Emma. Thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thank you, guys.
Now, normally you're behind the camera taking footage, but you were actually in a video that's had, well, nearly 3 million views. What were you saying? What were you expressing in that video?
So I was there covering the Southampton Patriots protest, and then I was walking past, actually, funnily enough, to go and interview someone else, and then someone just said, "Oh, do you have 2 minutes?" And then they asked me why I was there, what my thoughts about these people being labelled, you know, far-right racist, the typical things that we've heard. And yeah, I kind of, as I said, I'm not used to being on the other side of the camera, so I rambled a little bit, but people seem to like it.
Emma, I've spent a lot of time in Southampton. I used to work there, actually, when I was at university, and I've never seen anything like this. Years I spent in working and living around that area, and it feels to me that something is going on in the country. There is a feeling, there's a tension rising. Who are the two people counter-protesting these? Was it stand up to racism? Are we seeing this sort of factionalism happening across the country?
Well, first off, both the sides, you know, the right and the left, they are splitting up amongst themselves, which just makes it all kind of more complicated to navigate. Yeah. But in terms of who was actually there, I'm not sure if it was stand up to racism and Antifa, or just one of the two, because the police seemed quite reluctant to give us too much information. In fact, before the protest actually crossed paths, they said that they weren't treating it as a protest because it was technically just a gathering. Right. They were all just waiting outside a shop or something. So, yeah, it seems that there was definitely some typical two-tier justice going on. One side was policed more than the other. But, yeah, we are seeing this up and down the country, and even within those groups, you're seeing disagreements. I used to think that stand up to racism and Antifa were essentially one in the same. Apparently, they don't like each other. I've seen them go head-to-head, and it wasn't pretty, you know. So, yeah, it can be confusing.
Have you had a random call lately from a strange number, maybe trying to sell you something or even scam you? If so, your info could be out there. That's because of data brokers, shady companies that scrape the internet for your personal details and sell them to marketers or even scammers. These days, scammers can even use AI to mimic your friends' voices and trick you into sending money. It's not just annoying. Data brokers often target vulnerable people with high-interest loans or sketchy offers. But there is a solution. Incogni, the sponsor of this video. Incogni contacts data brokers on your behalf and requests your info be deleted from their databases. And because your data can keep popping up, Incogni keeps sending removal requests to make sure it stays gone. They've just launched a new unlimited plan with custom removals. If you find your info on a weird website, just send them the link and their privacy team will work to get it taken down. Getting started is easy. Hit the link in the description, create your account and let Incogni handle the rest. It's risk-free for 30 days and you'll get 60% off an annual plan with the code GBNews. Take back control of your data with Incogni.
Yeah, and also on the right, you have people who are quite happy with legal immigration but protest against illegal, and then people who think the overall level of immigration should come much further down. One really interesting development, I think, over this year has been the number of women on protests. And we saw, of course, the mothers in Epping wearing pink. Do you think this is a sign that the mood is shifting, that ordinary women are willing to get involved in something that really has been quite a male activity in the past, protesting?
Well, that, and I think it also just shows how much there's a safety aspect to this. Because at the end of the day, I mean, obviously, we know there are horrific crimes, violent crimes that happen all the time, and a lot of those, you know, with men. We've just seen with Wayne Broadhurst was brutally stabbed, awful, tragic. But in terms of the first issues where you think of when it comes to safety, when you think of immigration, rape, sexual assaults, it is the women and the young girls, children, boys as well, that you think of first. And I think that that is why women are getting involved so much. Especially, it's always seen as men are kind of like the first line of defence. And if you've managed to get through the man and get to the woman, if you get through the woman, you have access to the children. So I think this is also reverberating our want for the return of the traditional family unit and the kind of traditional gender roles a bit to come back a little bit. And, you know, God made us equal, but for different purposes.
That's a really interesting take on it. And actually, if you think about the grooming gangs as well, the children, the girls that were attacked were almost all girls who didn't have fathers, who didn't come from homes where their parents were checking where they were. Their lack of family was exploited by those rape gangs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it'd be a lot harder to groom a child that has a stand-up father at home as a perfect representation of what a man and what a boyfriend should be doing. And these girls clearly didn't have that.
Emma, so I've spoken to some of these protesters. I've been out there myself on many different protests. What I don't understand, and perhaps maybe your experience might be different to me, is that what are they hoping to achieve? It seems that actually these protests could go on in perpetuity, as these are ideological lines that are drawn in the country until at least a radical government comes along and either adopts one of those two things.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I mean, some protests, like we've seen with Epping and Canary Wharf, are much more concentrated and with a much more directive goal. Obviously, with Epping, to shut down the Bell Hotel. It's a very clear goal there. And they almost succeeded with the injunction. Obviously, the Home Office came in and stopped that. But in terms of the broad theme of protests, I do think that it is just, at the moment at least, just about showing people that we're not going to go quietly, we are here, we exist. No, not everyone is just fine with this, and not everyone thinks that diversity is our strength, and not everyone thinks that all these things. And especially when we're living in an age of propaganda, indoctrination, even with the trans ideology, speaking out about anything now could be considered dangerous. So I think at the moment the main goal is just to be like, you cannot take away our voice, we refuse to let you.
Emma, do you think that the constant protesting every weekend takes the power away from it, perhaps? Because one of the things I find about the Palestine marches, and it was similar when we started to see, I mean, a bit more radical protesting by Extinction Rebellion and others, actually it starts turning people against you because the vast majority of the country aren't protesting. We're talking about 5%, maybe less than the population, actually going out and protesting every weekend. Do you think it starts to take the power away from it?
I think it can do. I mean, again, because Epping is on my mind because of the recent Kabatu thing, but just to choose Epping as an example again, I do think that maybe that point could be valid because it lost its momentum, but again, because it had like that one very clear goal, in some people's eyes, I think it was keeping the pressure on. So I think it might be unfair to say, but I think it depends what it is that you're protesting for, whether it kind of gets a bit old or whether it keeps the pressure on. I think it differs in opinion.
And what do you think about how these protests are reported? Because depending on which media outlet you follow, you see vastly different numbers often reported, but also stories about how particular individuals might have been involved in violence or not. We see very different facts and figures coming out of these protests.
Well, there will always be, and I always say this just so no lefty can come at me or whatever, but there is always a bad bunch in every group. You will always, within every protest, you will find at least a handful of people that are just there to have a good time and throw some crap or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're just there to cause some trouble. But at the end of the day, 99% of these people are concerned citizens who want to make their voices heard. And unfortunately, the way that we have all been silenced for so long, people are starting to feel like the only way that they can make their voices heard is by doing something so loud and so outrageous that they have no choice but to listen. But there are pockets of unnecessary violence, but even that in itself is a byproduct of this. They want civil unrest. This is what they're pushing for.
Very, very briefly, as a female independent journalist, do you feel safe going to these protests?
I am trying to get myself some security, but obviously, you know, financially and whatever, it can prove quite difficult. But I've kind of found myself a group of fellow streamers and other friends that kind of we all check in with each other. That, are you going to this day? And we all look out for one another.
It can certainly get. I've been in very difficult encounters before where you can be a little bit scary. I mean, particularly if you're surrounded by people who don't agree with you, especially if you've got a GB News microphone. Let me tell you that for sure.
Yeah, there's a tip.
There we go. Independent journalist Emma Dunwell. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us about your experiences, enlightening stuff.